A dim light barely illuminated the cluttered attic, casting long shadows over dust-covered trunks and forgotten relics of the past. The air was heavy, laced with the faint smell of mildew, as if the room hadn't been disturbed in years. Amidst the chaos of old film reels, yellowed photographs, and broken projector parts, a hand reached out cautiously, brushing away cobwebs. It stopped suddenly on a peculiar object, a film reel. Unlike the others, this one was unmarked, its surface tarnished and cold to the touch, as though it had been lying in wait for decades. The reel was heavier than expected, the metal edges engraved with faint, intricate patterns. At the center of the reel was a symbol, a falcon etched in striking detail, its wings outstretched mid-flight. A shiver ran through the person's body, an unexplainable sense of unease settling in. The attic, which had been silent aside from the occasional patter of rain against the roof, now felt different, quieter, as though the space itself was holding its breath. Fingers trembled as they unearthed a small leather-bound journal lying beneath the reel. Its cover was cracked, its pages yellowed and fragile, but the writing inside was strangely legible. Scrawled in sharp, hurried script were warnings. Do not watch this alone. The Falcon sees everything, and leave it be. Some of the ink was smudged, as if written in desperation. A page toward the end bore only a single word. Why? Ignoring the creeping unease, the reel was taken downstairs to an old, rusted projector that had long been a decorative piece in the corner of the living room. The storm outside intensified, lightning casting brief, jagged flashes of light through the windows. A low hum of anticipation filled the air as the reel was carefully loaded onto the projector. It clicked into place with an unsettling finality, as though the device itself had been waiting for this moment. For a brief second, there was hesitation. A voice in the back of the mind whispered caution, but curiosity drowned it out. The dim glow of the projector's light cut through the room, sending a warm beam onto a nearby wall. The reel began to spin, its motion rhythmic and hypnotic. The soft whirring sound of the projector mingled with the rain, creating an eerie harmony. As the first frames appeared on the wall, the room seemed to shift. The air grew colder, denser, making each breath harder to take. The screen displayed the opening of a black and white film, a barren desert landscape, endless and bleak. In the distance, perched on a jagged rock, sat a falcon. It didn't move. It simply stared, its form sharp and lifelike despite the grainy quality of the footage. Time seemed to slow. The falcon's eyes glimmered faintly, drawing the watcher closer to the screen. It wasn't clear why, but something felt profoundly wrong. Yet it was too late to stop now. The reel spun steadily, casting flickering shadows across the walls as the film played. The black and white desert landscape stretched endlessly, vast and lifeless, save for the falcon perched motionless on a jagged rock. The camera zoomed in slowly, almost imperceptibly, as though urging the viewer to focus on the falcon's every detail. Its feathers seemed unnaturally precise, the texture vivid enough to feel almost tangible. Its eyes, sharp, glowing faintly, held a peculiar weight, as if they weren't just looking outward but directly at the viewer. Suddenly, the falcon moved. Its head jerked to the side in a sharp, mechanical motion, breaking the stillness. The sound of the movement was unsettling, like dry bones snapping together. The camera followed the falcon as it stretched its wings and launched into the air, gliding soundlessly across the barren desert. The scene shifted abruptly. The once empty sands were now scattered with strange ruins, skeletal remains of buildings with jagged edges and dark, yawning openings. There was no music, only the sound of the wind, low, persistent, and growing louder with every frame. Occasionally, faint whispers could be heard beneath the wind, fleeting and indistinct, like voices just out of reach. The camera panned through the ruins, lingering on unsettling details, a handprint smeared across a crumbling wall, a faint trail of blood leading into darkness, and shadows that seemed to move independently of the crumbling structures. The falcon appeared again, perched atop one of the tallest ruins. This time, its gaze was unrelenting, following the viewer no matter where they looked. Its presence grew heavier, almost oppressive, as though its stare was no longer confined to the screen. The projection light flickered briefly, and for a moment, the room itself seemed darker. Objects in the attic, the broken projector parts, scattered reels, appeared distorted in the edges of vision, though nothing had moved. On screen, the Falcon took flight again, its wings cutting through the wind with unnatural precision. The camera followed as it soared over the ruins, casting a shadow that rippled and twisted across the ground, taking the vague form of human silhouettes before dissolving into sand. The next scene was unlike the rest. The film cut to what appeared to be a room, eerily similar to the attic where the reel had been discovered. Every detail matched perfectly: the scattered belongings, the faint light, the dust clinging to every surface. A chill ran through the watcher as they realized this wasn't just a scene. It was their attic. The Falcon's shadow appeared on the wall in the film, growing larger and larger as it approached, though the bird itself remained unseen. The whispers in the film grew louder, words now forming. You see it now. It sees you. The camera turned abruptly, as though held by an unseen hand, and for the first time, it felt as if the viewer wasn't watching the film anymore. The film was watching them. Then the screen went black. The reel stopped spinning. The silence that followed was deafening. The silence that followed the abrupt end of the film was unnerving. The projector hummed for a moment, the light flickering weakly, but the room felt suffocating, as if the walls themselves had drawn in close. The once chilling whispers had vanished, leaving behind a heavy stillness that seemed to press in from all sides. A cold sweat broke out across the skin, and the air had become thick, almost suffocating. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before, as if the hands of time were moving faster. The reel lay still on the projector, but something felt wrong. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch unnaturally, stretching across the walls like dark fingers creeping toward the viewer. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window, making the glass tremble. The lights flickered again, but this time they didn't return to full brightness. The dim glow left everything half visible, making the room feel more like a dream, a nightmare, than a familiar space. It began subtly at first. The clock on the wall, the same one that had always ticked reliably, stopped. No reason, no explanation. Just silence where there should have been the familiar ticking sound. The temperature dropped, the kind of cold that settles deep into the bones, not the kind of chill that a sweater could ward off. Then, faintly, as if from far away, a sound emerged. The fluttering of wings, sharp, distinct. It felt like it was coming from inside the room, but it was impossible to pinpoint the source. The journal, still open on the table, began to shift. Its pages fluttered, turning on their own, the paper curling as if the book was alive. The writing in the journal had changed. Where before there had been warning scrawls and questions, now it was filled with dark, jagged symbols, a strange language that no one could understand. The words seemed to writhe on the page, moving as if they were trying to escape the confines of the paper. The final entry read, "It sees you. The Falcon has chosen." Suddenly, the shadows in the room grew deeper. Something shifted in the corners, too fast to catch, too sudden to comprehend. The wings, those sharp, unnatural wings, fluttered again, but this time closer, louder. And then, the air stilled, as if all life had gone silent at once. The feeling of being watched, of something unseen, surged to the forefront. The very air felt thick with a presence. It wasn't just the film now. It was real, tangible. The curse had already begun to take hold. A distant thud, soft at first, but growing louder, reverberated through the walls. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moved closer. But no one was there. The room seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and a weight settled over the space. It felt like the air itself was pressing down, crushing everything in its path. The temperature dropped even further, frost beginning to form on the edges of the window as if winter had arrived far too early. The whispers from the film, those same fragmented, indistinct voices, returned, this time in full force. The falcon's call broke through the quiet, sharp and piercing, louder than before. The sound of its wings, now unmistakably closer, cut through the thick air. Then, all at once, the room seemed to shake. Not violently, but with a force that rattled the floorboards and made everything seem unsteady. The shadows in the corners twisted and writhed like living things, and the faint sound of scratching echoed from somewhere beyond the walls. It was then that the truth hit. The film wasn't just a film. It was a trap. A doorway. And the falcon? It wasn't confined to the screen anymore. It had been waiting, patient, for the right moment to make its move. And now it was here. The air was thick with tension, the oppressive weight of unseen eyes pressing down with every breath. The room felt smaller now, as though it had somehow closed in around the person, the walls shifting, the floorboards creaking underfoot with every movement. Every shadow seemed to pulse, alive, stretching and contracting like some dark, breathing entity. The falcon's presence was no longer just a lingering feeling. It was real, tangible, its essence saturating the very air. A sudden gust of cold air hit the back of the neck, and the oppressive silence shattered with the unmistakable sound of wings, flapping, rapid, coming closer, closer. There was no escape now. The falcon had found its target. Then, without warning, everything went dark. The hum of the projector, the fluttering of wings, even the sound of breath was swallowed up by the suffocating blackness. The temperature plummeted to an unbearable chill. Every heartbeat felt like thunder, echoing in the dark, each pulse vibrating through the body. The only thing that remained was the weight of the falcon's gaze, burning with an intensity that went far beyond sight. A voice, low, ancient, whispered, though there were no lips to form the words. It came from everywhere, inside the mind and outside it, all at once. You've seen it. You've woken it. Now you will join it. A cold wind cut through the darkness, carrying the faintest hint of desert dust, as if pulling the person into the barren world of the film. The sensation was suffocating, like sinking into quicksand, the very air growing heavy, each breath harder to take. The temperature seemed to fall further, until the room, the space, the world itself felt frozen. Then, the falcon appeared, not on the screen, but in the room, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intensity. Its wings stretched wide, casting shadows across every surface, reaching into the darkest corners. The air crackled with energy, a crackling that felt like electricity coursing through the body, unsettling and unnatural. The falcon's wings beat with a sound that reverberated through the bones, as if the very fabric of reality were being torn apart by its presence. The whispers returned, louder now, sharp and clear. You cannot escape. You will remain. It was a choice, an ultimatum. The falcon's voice rang out again, not with words, but with a presence that filled the mind. Stay with me, or release me to others. The world is ripe for the taking, and you are the key. What will you choose? The decision was unbearable. To stay would mean eternal entrapment, to be bound within the film, a shadow, a forgotten whisper in the ruins of an endless desert. To release the film, to pass on the curse, was an equally terrible fate. Yet there was no other choice. The curse was too deep, too strong. The falcon was already here, its shadow spreading over everything. A cold sweat drenched the skin as the decision was made. The film must be released. The reel had to be passed on, given to someone else so the cycle could continue. The fog of the moment lifted, and suddenly, the room returned to normal. The temperature rose, the shadows receded. The room was still, the oppressive presence gone. But it was too late. The choice had been made. The falcon's curse had taken hold. A single DVD sat on the table, a copy of the film. A new, untouched version, ready to be found, to be watched. There was no escaping the cycle now. The screen flickered with a brief flash of light, just a brief, passing moment. And then, everything was still again. The falcon's call, distant but clear, echoed one last time, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in the curse. And as the new victim, oblivious, picked up the DVD from a dusty shelf, a soft whisper traveled through the air. It begins again,